To prevent my article from turning into a boring report of a dilettante who has picked up internet information and suffers from graphomania, first of all, I will make a small lyrical introduction from my childhood. I will also give a documentary extract from the expedition diary for 1977. I would never have undertaken to write on this topic, which is controversial in scientific circles, and does not have 100% confirmation of the existence of these mysterious people, relict hominids. But having worked in the mountains of Tien Shan and Pamir for more than 30 years, I had to hear hundreds of stories about Sasquatch, or as he is called in Asia, Almasty. It was impossible not to believe in his existence. I am 100% sure, so I can safely speak on his behalf. I am. I remember my childhood very well. Near our village of Almasty, where I was born, the Fergana Valley ended and passed into the spurs of one of the great massifs of the planet, the Tien Shan. To have fun, we went to the mountains, to the first hills, which we called Humpy. At first, we played Cossack robbers, using the caves dug in the 20s by the Basmachi gangs of Mutdenbeck and Kershermat. When I grew up, I learned to climb steep stone steeps, acquiring rock climbing skills and practicing the tenacity in my fingers, which would save my life more than once in the future. All adults, and especially parents, warned to be home by evening and don't go far, or Almasty will drag you away and rip out your liver. These were the first words I heard about the mountain man, or as he is called, Sasquatch. A little later, when I began to get acquainted with shepherds and hunters of those places, I learned that the name of this man, before whom hunting dogs and mature fur trappers trembled, was Jezdermak. No one remembered who had named him so. Old men said that he had lived in our mountains since their great-great-great-grandfathers were infants. Any missing livestock was attributed to Almasty, because stealing was despised among the indigenous peoples of Central Asia. Even the police, quite often, attributed cases of cattle theft to Jezdermak. Livestock mostly disappeared from the outlying houses, which had vegetable gardens facing the river and the mountains. What is interesting, on the night when a cow, a sheep, or a chicken disappeared, even hunting dogs, sharp and vicious tigans, did not break the silence of warm nights with their barking. By the age of 15, girls were growing up fast under the Asian sun, and boys began to go on dangerous hunts to shoot dongus and argali. They lived in huts or caves. At night, they recounted terrible stories about wild men, trembling with fear and clutching their weapons. But they walked. They went anyway. No threats and persuasions of parents could not reject the craving for the dangers, mysteries, and incomprehensibility of the mountains. A special place in these mysteries was occupied by the wild man, whom I started to look for even then. I remember how one Deccan at the bazaar told the crowd, without removing the horror from his face, that he had seen a Bigfoot carrying away his cow on his shoulder. Bigfoot was already far away when the owner of the cattle started shooting, to no avail, although he was an excellent hunter in our village. The local prophet, the Honorable Kudaibergen, listened and said, "You can't kill him. He knows where an arrow or a bullet flies." Half a century from the time the seer uttered these words, I will tell you what the phrase means, but at the end of the article, before I make my point. The second serious acquaintance with the evidence about the existence of Sasquatch occurred in 1977, when I worked in survey expeditions. Below, I will give 2 pages from my diary. The expedition stood at the junction of 2 mountain formations of the Tien Shan and Pamir, near the Kizilsu River, which is considered to be the conventional boundary of these mountain massifs. Here, in the Alai Valley, on the border between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, at the foot of Lenin Peak, we were engaged in surveying and topographic surveying of old bridge crossings, and finding new, promising river crossings. Presumably his way was through the Alai Range, to the valley of the Sauksai River, where there were forests and a lot of game. Of course, if it happened now, I would not make such a hasty inspection. Perhaps the dropped hairs from the body, thanks to the dark coloring, melted into the snow. But I took measurements, which I am grateful for, young me. Having returned, I asked Kermenbeck to describe the Sasquatch as people living here tell about him. He emphasized his pointed ears. The shepherd recalled his grandfather's story. When blood flowed in the Alai Valley instead of water in the Kizil River, and the soldiers of the Kokon Khan slaughtered 100 people every day. At night, Almasty came to the fortress in Darat Kurgan. He shouted loudly and beat himself in the chest. They shot at him from the walls, but bullets and arrows did not take him. He took a big stone and broke down the gate. He tore the men apart and threw them all over the fortress. By morning, he had killed 100 Khan's warriors. The second day, he came to Saritash. There, too, he killed 100 warriors. And so every night, he killed 100 warriors. When there were no conquerors left in Alai, the inhabitants brought some rams and tied them at the foot of Achiktash. Everyone saw him eating rams at night. He did not roast them on fire, but chewed raw meat. Mathematicians say you can prove absolutely anything with formulas, even the presence of a piece of meat in a refrigerator that doesn't have any. I'm not a mathematician, but having touched the geodesic sciences in the past, allow me to join this method of proof. The possibility of a probable hominid encounter using simple arithmetic calculations that will be understood by the reader. Calling in the help of criminalistics and its methods, and also knowledge in proportions of a human body on Square of Ancients, I shall try to squeeze out, from records of 40 years ago, all that it is possible. The average length of a step is 0.99 meters. So according to the formula of calculation of growth on a step P equals ds minus 0.37 times 4, where P is the height of a person. ds is the stride length. 0.37 and 4 are constant. We find P equals open parenthesis, 0.99 minus 0.37, close parenthesis, times 4 equals 2.48 meters. If we take into account that the movement took place at an altitude of more than 3,500 meters above sea level, and on the site, steepness of about 20 degrees, and the step in these conditions in any animal is shorter, we can safely say that the growth of this hominid exceeded 2.5 meters. Let's try to calculate the growth by applying the famous golden section or square of the ancients. But for this, we need to know the size of a foot, or at least a footprint. In our case, after some time, the footprint has settled, and the edges have thawed and widened. It is possible that the previous snow cover has melted, joining with the old, previous snow. If there were any, the Vavaloki and Polovaloki have coarsened and blurred. The trail is now 35 by 45 centimeters in size, with an average depth of 12 centimeters. The last record of falling snow dates back to June 13th, but the weather record was made 60 kilometers from the Kumkir Pass. In the mountains, precipitation can concentrate on an area of several hundred square meters, and the sun is shining all around. So the date of the last snowfall cannot be determined, but even the known amount of time that has passed since the snowfall will not give an exact answer to the question, how many centimeters of snow has thawed, and how deformed is the trail. Because snow melt is affected by many factors: ambient temperature, air humidity, altitude, wind, snow composition, snow clarity, direction of sunlight, degree of evaporation, and so on. Since we simply can't know all these characteristics, and so we will be extremely cautious in our conclusions. As far as I remember, at that time, the snow on the glacier had a high density. It consisted of ice crystals, and so there was no fresh snow. Its melting rate cannot be determined. We will assume that the trail did not penetrate deeply due to the existing dense crust of the previous snowfall. If the object was walking on loose, freshly fallen snow, it simply crumbled, forming a shapeless funnel. In loose snow, the rate of melting, evaporation, and weathering is much more intensive than in snow of medium density. The solution is simple. In loose snow, a person falls through 50 to 60 centimeters, but the rate of disappearance is faster than in dense snow. In a dense cover, a person falls through 20 to 30, but the speed of its melting is slower than loose. So for the past days, in any case, it has had time to fly away to the real sediment, regardless of the composition of the sediment. But it is impossible to determine the true size, so we need an experiment, which had to be carried out in Smolensk. So based on my own powerlessness over time, I apply the method of poke. For several days in February, I conduct observations in the city of Smolensk. As a result, based on practice received in sunny weather, at an air temperature of +6 degrees, for 3 days the deformation of the trail increased by 8 centimeters. In cloudy days with wind, at a temperature of +2 to +6 degrees, the trail changed its shape for 2 days by 2 centimeters. Let's average the result. Let's take the print, taking into account the correction of 5 centimeters on each side for blurriness. For further calculations, let's take the size 30 by 40, canonical proportions of structure of a human figure, according to the Square of Ancients. It is ratio between various parts of a human body, but these proportions should not necessarily concern the animal which we study. But let's not be picky, and let's put the studied object as an ancestor of man of upright walking, i.e., us. And let's calculate its growth according to ancient conclusions. According to the golden ratio, the length of the foot should correspond to 1/7 of the human height. The size of the footprint is taken here, taking into account deformation, as 40 centimeters. So 7 times 40 equals 280. Let's duplicate the calculation of height with a more accurate formula used in forensics for the size of the footprint. V equals 3.1, dm plus 4, sen plus 53, where V, height of the person, dn, length of a sole, foot, in centimeters, sen, width of a sole, foot, in centimeters, 3.1, 4, 53, constant values. By simple arithmetic action we obtain V equals 3.1 times 40 plus 4 times 30 plus 53 equals 2.97 meters, taking into account the above-mentioned signs that the animal was walking uphill at an altitude of 3,500 meters above sea level, and so his step was shorter. All three calculations, confirming each other, give a growth figure of 270 to 290 centimeters. And one more detail. The stride of the right foot is longer, about 10 centimeters. That can only tell us one thing. He's right-handed, like most people, or his left leg was damaged. We can assume that these footprints were left by an ordinary running man, the distance between the footprints of which correspond to a meter in length, but at such a height, where every 3 steps you take a few inhalations and exhalations to balance your breathing, it is simply impossible. It is also impossible to imagine a person whose height is 2.5 meters in these regions, because the local population of Kyrgyz people does not possess gigantism, and the maximum height is 1.6 meters, which according to the formula ds equals p divided by 4 plus 0.37 would correspond to a step 40.3 centimeters long. Of the wild animals, the snow leopard has the skill of stepping with its hind paw into the imprint of its front paw, or close to it. For this reason, 2 combined footprints of an urbis are sometimes mistaken for human footprints, especially when the sun and wind have retouched the print. During quiet walking, the distance between the tracks of a leopard is 40 to 45 centimeters. In our case, with the length of the prints of 99 centimeters, it does not fit. The direction here, even because the indentations on the heel and toe differ by only 2 centimeters, it gives the right direction. But there is also the fact that the trail goes almost head-on to the slope. A beast, and even more so a man, prefers to descend on the smallest slope in order to prevent a breakdown on a slippery slope and to save strength. With a descending object, the trail would loop across the glacier. These 2 features give us a precise direction, determined even from a blurred trail. The distance in the prints fits elk, deer, and horse. There is no talk about moose, as they have never been seen in these parts, and the last deer was killed in the Arslan Bab forest back in the 30s of the 20th century, the more so because only a mad animal can go to the ice silence, where he will find nothing but death. It remains to compare the left traces with a horse and, if possible, a drunken shepherd on it, because a sober man would not ride on a glacier. I myself would like it to be horse hoof prints, so as not to bother myself and not to weigh on the reader's brain. But when I followed the trail for a few kilometers, and they came to a pile of ice debris that fell from the glacier cut off like a cleaver, I realized that only a madman could drive a horse into this chaos. Yes, she herself would not go on the glacier, which hides deadly dangerous cracks, and moreover, a hoof print would leave a rounded shape, but here it's oval. If a person has become a tracker even once, he knows that it is impossible to confuse the trace of a man and a horse on snow, even if it is subjected to many days of heat and wind influence. In any case, the hoof print will be rounded, with a strong compaction of the bottom against the oval of a human footprint. Based on the above recollections and documents, I am entitled to reason and draw my conclusions. Whoever has more grounds and facts to talk about the relict hominid, Sasquatch, can enter into a polemic or dispute with me. I will be only grateful if there is such a person. All, without exception, fairy tales, myths, and legends have a real background, which took place many times ago. Nowadays, the birth of fictional stories with the advent of the internet has increased by leaps and bounds, but these are one-day stories. The first sources reporting on Sasquatch appeared back in the time of Plutarch. I will not tell you about the great multitude of publications, 90% of which are falsified gossip and stories inflated by journalists. The most reliable information, which can be believed indisputably, is the meeting of the writer Ivan Turgenev with the forest man, which he told Guy de Maupassant, and the latter has already told the readers in a small note, the terror. At the time of the adulation of writers and the holy worship of the book, its creators, i.e. authors of publications, did not even think of lying to the reader. This peculiar code of honor of the writer lost its force in the first half of the 20th century, started by the yellow press in America and metastasized to the rest of our planet. Therefore, it is impossible to disbelieve the classics. The well-known relic kept in the Kumdung Monastery, consisting of a scalp and a Yeti brush, I believe to be the only real exhibit in the world. Some media have publicized that these items are fake. In the 10 Buddhist precepts, the fourth place is, do not lie or slander. Lying is despised and not acceptable in Buddhism. Those who have once met these God-fearing people, who do not whisper prayers only in their sleep, will realize that they are incapable of lying, and even more so of forgery. Their purity is in their lives, and only an ignorant person, far from the life of the Tibetan people, who does not know and respect their culture, could declare the kept relics to be fake. Everything kept in monasteries is made for Buddha, and to deceive Buddha is the worst sin of all. Two brothers, geographer and journalist, Supernenko P. and Supernenko U, in 2004 published Mountain Encyclopedia. There was no such publication anywhere in the world. Their honesty, backed by the authority of scientists, cannot be disbelieved. They quite truthfully describe the meetings of people with captors. That is how they call snowmen in Karachay, Cherkessia. Legends about the wild man exist in different places, in no way related to each other, and everywhere have their own names. As it was said in the preface, in the area of the western Tien Shan, he is called Almasty, with the name Jestermak. I know about 120 names. I will cite only a few, for different regions and countries. In America, Bigfoot. In Australia, Ijovi, Turamuli. In Russia, Bolshak, Avdoshka, Shilikun, Mulena, Maigiki, Chulyuk. In the Caucasus, Kaptar. In Uzbekistan, Yavoy Adam. In Burma, Toko. In Malaysia, Giji. And there is it even on the islands of the Zoid archipelago, with the name Mavar and Sukpa. In Africa, it is called Agogwe, Gagondakari, Chamazid, and Didi. In the Pamirs, where our story takes place, it is called Vade, Void, Jondor, and the common name in Asia, Almasty. Only because of this long list we can say that he exists. Despite the distances and remoteness of countries, islands, and continents from each other, it exists. I will answer why it does not exist at the end of the article. In defense of the essay, it will not be superfluous to call for helpers of people whose authority in the world, among mountaineers, geographers, and scientists, is undeniable. These are not internet trash, but serious statements. One of the most respected people among vagabonds, Reinhold Messner in his book Crystal Horizon, cites a photo of a Bigfoot trail, which has recently been bombarded with accusations of hoax, but I believe the respected traveler who has traveled half of the planet in the most extreme places than anonymous judges who consider a broken TV set to be the biggest adventure, and they had no greater difficulties than cleaning the trunk of their car soiled by birds. Reinhold Messner, for the first time, met Yeti in 1986 in Tibet. The meeting so amazed the mountaineer that he became an inquisitive researcher of these mysterious people. Messner is called the mountaineer of all times, and his name invariably appears in print with epithets of the superlative degree. The most successful mountaineer, the most prolific mountaineering writer, the most passionate defender of nature, finally, the most popular man in general, surpassing in popularity the most famous athletes and artists. Candidate of Philological Sciences, Master of Sports of the USSR in Mountaineering v. Matvenko. Yeti Trail from R. Messner's book, Crystal Horizon. The photo was taken by rock climber Eric Shipton in 1951 at an altitude of 5,800 meters in Nepal. These photos are not downloaded from the internet, but specially scanned from serious books. The authority of Edmund Hillary will not raise doubts even in the most ardent skeptic. This is the man who, together with Sherpa Tenzing Norgay, was the first to set foot on the highest point of the planet, Jomolungma, on May 29, 1953. It was at this time that the leader of the first successful Everest expedition, Colonel John Hunt, met Yeti himself. One of the great Englishmen of his time, for whom honor and duty were above all else, could not be disbelieved. The existence of the wild man was confirmed by a Nepalese Tenzing's father, who saw him twice, Once again, I will note that I know the peoples of Asia, not by hearsay, and I have lived with them side by side for more than half a century, and not in civilized cities, but directly in their primordial abode, the mountains. They don't know how to lie. Edmund Hillary, 1919-2008, New Zealand explorer and mountaineer, one of the first ascenders to Everest in 1953, Tenzing Norgay, 1914-1986, Nepalese Sherpa mountaineer. Together with Hillary, climbed to the highest point of the planet in 1953. In the same year, Hillary organized an expedition to search for the mysterious creature, but apart from footprints, nothing was found. Further, at the end of the article, I will give my point of view, where I will tell why exactly those people do not find the one they are looking for, and meet Sasquatch only to random people. Subsequently, Hillary more than once made reports on Bigfoot and proved to the scientific world that there is one. Edmund Hillary speaking to journalists with evidence of the existence of Bigfoot. 1960. A special place proving the existence of Bigfoot is a 1-minute documentary made by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin in 1967 in Northern California. A more controversial argument has yet to be made in the long race for Bigfoot's words in his own dialect. I am. Scientists, forensic experts, and Manco-weeds have proven the authenticity of the movie. The main defender of the reality of this brief moment depicting a female Bigfoot is anthropologist and anatomist Noah David Hensonism of the University of Texas. He calculated a height of 280 centimeters. With the help of Hollywood experts, studied all the body movements, down to the play of muscles, rippling chest, and shine of hair, concluded, about the fake is out of the question. Many photos allegedly depicting wild men are of poor quality. They're certainly suspicious, but agree, everything happens unexpectedly when an unknown creature appears, and there's no time to adjust the camera. It's not like taking selfies of your face sitting on the toilet. According to the Russian scientist Kirill Yeskov, where once a professional has set foot, no animal larger than a rat has any chance to remain unknown to science. But there are places on the planet, and there are many of them, where the foot of a professional has not yet reached. For example, I can cite my own meeting with a quite sensible man offended by people and went into the wild, where for 17 years he has not met with people. This case is described by me in the story Karishkir, a human name, based on real events, which was included in the book, The Time of Bird's Departure. I will start with simple mathematical calculations about the probability of meeting a reasonable man, that is you and me, with the animal, which Kirill Yeskov considers the standard of size of known creatures, a rat and Sasquatch. People on planet Earth, according to the latest calculations, 8.2 billion. Rats, according to the proportions calculated by scientists, should be 4 times as many. That means there are 28 trillion, 500 billion of them. Sasquatch, according to comparison with areas of habitat, number of witnesses, confirmed and unconfirmed data of direct contact with them, should live within 6,000. The land area is 148,939,063 square kilometers. We will not separate oases, deserts, mountains, and cities by gradation. Let's assume that everyone lives everywhere. We average it out. Percentage error will still be negligible. It's just illustrative calculations. So, on 1 square kilometer of land, live humans, 47.8 people per square kilometer, rats, 191.4 rats per square kilometer, hominids, 400,000 people per square kilometer, 5 million times less. If you hope to meet Sasquatch and wander around our planet incessantly before you see him, 5 million rats will run across your path. From the above figures, we get that a human encounter with a rat equals 400 units, while an encounter with Sasquatch equals only 800,000 units. It is possible to make an amendment, taking into account that the habitat of the Bigfoot is wild, inaccessible for the main mass of the population, where mainly hunters, tourists, mountaineers, geologists, prospectors, shepherds, and simple vagabonds come. This category of people, from the bulk of the people, is 20% of the population of the Earth. So it's them who have a higher percentage of hominid encounters, but not much. It will be equal to 1,400,000 units. The above mathematical analysis does not answer the question, does he exist? According to probability theory, one can leave home tomorrow and meet a 3-meter hominid walking with a saber-toothed tiger on a leash in the local park. The probability of a chance encounter, even such a fantastic one, cannot be ruled out. History knows quite a few cases that are not even included in the famous probability theory. In any case, even if developed to the smallest detail, there is always a chance. We could take an example from our ordinary life. More often than not, in our daily life, The police are looking for criminals. The average percentage of solving crimes in the world, and thus catching criminals, is 55%. Here, everything seems to be in sight. There is a crime. Sometimes there are witnesses, evidence, card catalogs, equipment, a lot of highly qualified specialists in a limited area, mostly the criminal lives in the same city where he committed the offense. And having so many chances, there are 55 people out of 100 offenders. And here, the question is asked. According to the probability, criminals are found by chance or not found by chance? Of course, not found by chance. So the probability of meeting with Sasquatch, in addition to all the obstacles that I indicated, add here another 45% of the case of not finding. Now let's get to the main point. People who come into contact with the life of Sasquatch in real or virtual existence. 1. 60% are amateur enthusiasts. 2. 25% are trying to find him, sitting at the computer and beyond the store for chips, kefir, and toilet paper have not gone anywhere. 3. 10% are journalists, ready to believe any lie from a drunken shepherd just to stir up a sensation. 4. 3% are fanatics of their cause, obsessive searchers who live almost like the object of their search. In the end, they become like him. 5% are serious scientists who have dedicated themselves to finding Bigfoot. 6. 1% are people who have met him but tell few people about it. Of the last 1%, 99%, remember this number, of all reports about Bigfoot come from people who are not looking for him. Hunters, fishermen, mushroom hunters, hikers, mountaineers, and even housewives who like to walk in the woods on a moonlit night. Sasquatch is the same age as Pithecanthropus and evolved parallel to man of reason in his own way. He simply followed the path of least resistance to evolution and chose the easiest way to perfection. He does not need intelligence at the level of plutonium nucleus splitting technology to develop the atomic bomb. His main thoughts are searching for food and hiding from enemies, which he considers to be his closest relatives, you and me. So he thinks at the level of an ordinary primate, standing 1 to 2 steps below his fellow man of reason. And the hidden life left him pristine of feelings, telepathy, intuition, and maybe the transition from one state to another, which we humans cannot reproduce even with the help of modern technology. He has not lost the feelings of instinct, clairvoyance, and subconscious thinking that our ancestors had. He has not invented the radio, which helped mankind to finally lose the sense of brain thinking transformation. So Sasquatch knows when he is being sought or hunted, and so he is simply hiding. From researchers of telepathic phenomena, different kinds of soothsayers, psychics, and oracles, we learn that capturing thought at a distance comes from those people who send, even involuntarily, a mental impulse. This is where the mystery opens up. If I am writing an article, then I must put forward my version. Maybe it will be in some way in contact with the conclusions of other researchers, but it came to me long ago while I was working in expeditions, when mountain hunters told me, Almasty turns away from the bullet when it is just flying out of the barrel, and I have the right to publicize my explanation. It will never be found. He will not be found by the very people who are looking for him. Sasquatch has put himself outside our science. He may not know that he is wanted only to be seen and photographed, but his hidden instinct catches the impulse of danger, and he, receiving the telepathic signal of the hunter, manages to escape before he crosses paths with the person looking for him. And people, the very 99% to whom he meets, do not think to see him. So their brain is a calm one that thinks only of flowers growing in a clearing. Sasquatch receives no one-way alarm signal. His brain is in contact with the consciousness of the person who is looking for him, i.e., the search information of the hunter, without his participation in any effort, goes to the object of the hunt, which the latter freely reads at a distance. Stanislav Lem did not say rash words. The evolution failed to accumulate telepathic signs. It does not mean that there was nothing to accumulate, sift, and condense. One example is the intuitive connection of twins, cats, dogs, but also lower creatures. Everyone has noticed that a flock of fish, a huge shoal of several thousand individuals, noticing danger, turns to flee in an instant. The same is true of flocks of birds. So why couldn't these abilities be preserved in one of the highest animals of the primate order? If you and I, i.e., reasonable people, do not have these abilities, it does not mean that they are absent in others. The reader will ask, and the traces of his vital activity? Where are they? Where are their lairs? Where are the gnawed bones? And of course, the big question, where are his feces? I will start with the last, so exciting question. Since all animals, including us, carry an informational load, i.e., they can tell quite a lot about their owner. For the same reason, in order not to be detected, Yetis simply hide them in the ground or water, like many wild animals. For the same reason, in order not to be discovered, he does not build a permanent lair. Like wolves and bears, it makes temporary dwellings for labor and raising offspring. Using an example of mathematical analysis, I will give the probability of finding the Yeti's den. Wolves on the planet, according to Wikipedia, 8,043,000. Sasquatches, as stated above, 6,000. Males, incomers, and parajarks and wolves in relation to females, 5 to 1. So there are 1,608,600 wolf dwellings on Earth. Males and Yeti children. Let's take into account that they do not give birth every year and do not have more than one child, 3 to 1. So for the period of childbirth, they organize 1,800 rookeries around the globe. Imagine, this is one rookery per 82,744 square kilometers. So on the territory of Russia, there could be 206 of them. For example, I will cite the area of Smolensk region, with its territory of 49,800 square kilometers. It is for 2 such areas as possible only one hominid nest. To meet Bigfoot, you must first meet 1,340 wolves, and to find a rookery of Bigfoot, you must first find 90 wolf dens. But I'm sure Sasquatch's intelligence far surpasses that of a wolf, and the presence of grasping abilities of hands helps them to build more hidden shelters than wolves, who often live in badger and fox dens, having previously kicked out or eaten the owners, and then widening the loophole. These calculations are given for illustrative purposes only. They should by no means be taken as real figures. Here we have only calculated the probability theory to show on an illustrative example the difficulties of search, and even more so, the probability of meeting. The reader, who knows the nature of a lie, may have a question. What was Sasquatch doing in the hollow stone emptiness, where only stunted bushes of caragana cover the yellow-gray space, under which only a gopher can hide, and from the animals live only red, lazy baybacks? Possessing a heightened intuition, it means that he perfectly preserved the memory of ancestors at the genetic level. As far back as 800 years ago, the Alai Valley was covered with forests consisting of nut and fruit species. After the settlement of these places, people cut down 1,700 square kilometers of forest for 5 centuries, turning Alai into a semi-desert landscape. Perhaps our guest ancestors were from this area. Why not? Before the arrival of Marco Polo to these lands in 1271, who, having seen the stretching valley from the Taldic Pass, exclaimed, "Oh, Wahang!" Jarenia, which meant the abode of God. It was covered with a dense forest. There, cut off from the whole world by high snowy passes, lived, most likely, a large population of hominids, which after the arrival here, man of reason, dispersed throughout the planet. Confirmation of my conclusion is the nut and fruit forests of Arslanbab, preserved since the Mesozoic era, which are only 100 kilometers away from our place. I, as the author of the article, have the right to my point of view, even if it may seem rambling and unreasonable. If some scientists claim that it was from the Tien Shan that the life of mankind began and spread across the planet, so why can't it be said that in the valleys, closed from all sides by high ridges, relict hominids, the same age as Arslanbab forests, were preserved? He did not try to impose his point of view on the reader regarding the existence of the mysterious creature. His truth expressed in the article perhaps only adds to the questions, but he will be satisfied if he has introduced some straightening into the zigzag of the great mystery.